Picture the Roman legionary. An almost inhuman figure, encased in gleaming, segmented armor, a large, curved shield in one hand and a short, deadly sword in the other. For nearly 500 years, this soldier was the face of the most dominant military machine the world had ever seen, carving out an empire that stretched from the misty hills of Scotland to the sun-scorched deserts of Mesopotamia. But how did they do it? Was it just one brilliant invention, a single piece of armor, or a superweapon that guaranteed victory? The answer is far more interesting, and it was hiding for 2,000 years, buried in a German forest. Welcome to 10-Minute History. I'm your host, Jake Sullivan, and today we're dissecting the Roman war machine to uncover the secrets of its success. We're going beyond the myths to look at the three pillars of Roman power: the armor that protected the soldier, the engines that broke the city, and the tactical genius that won the field. The strength of any army begins with the individual soldier. The Romans understood this better than anyone. In their early days, Roman soldiers looked a lot like Greek hoplites, wearing heavy, custom-made bronze muscle cuirasses, but only if they were wealthy enough to afford them. This was expensive, restrictive, and not ideal for the rugged mountains of Italy, where Rome fought its first defining wars. Rome needed a change, and they found it by copying their enemies, the Celts. The result was the Lorica hamata, or mail shirt. This was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, made from thousands of tiny, interlocking iron rings. It was flexible, allowing a soldier to bend, twist, and run with ease. It offered fantastic protection against the slashing swords common among Rome's enemies, and it could be repaired on the march and used for decades. For nearly 500 years, from the wars against Hannibal to the campaigns of Julius Caesar, the Lorica hamata was the workhorse armor of the legions. But it wasn't perfect. It was heavy, weighing up to 15 kilograms, and all of that weight hung directly from the soldier's shoulders, which was exhausting on a long march. And while it stopped cuts, it did little to absorb the crushing impact of a heavy axe or club. The Romans, ever the innovators, kept experimenting, which led them to develop their most iconic piece of military hardware. This is the armor you see in every movie, the Lorica Segmentata. Its name was actually invented by scholars in the 16th century. We have no idea what the Romans actually called it. For decades, historians believed it was introduced around the 2nd century AD, based on its appearance on monuments like Trajan's Column. But then, in 1987, archaeologists in Germany made a stunning discovery. At a place called Kalkriese Hill, the confirmed site of the devastating Battle of the Teutoburg forest in the year 9 AD, they found the fragments of a Lorica segmentata. This proved that the armor was being used a full century earlier than anyone had thought by the doomed legions of the General Varus. The Lorica segmentata was a revolution in design. It was made of overlapping horizontal iron plates, held together by internal leather straps and external brass buckles and hinges. This modular design had some incredible advantages. First, and most importantly, was superior protection. The solid plates were far better than mail at stopping a spear thrust or an arrow. They were also vastly better at absorbing blunt force trauma. A blow from a warhammer that might break your ribs under a mail shirt would have its energy spread across a wide plate, turning a fatal injury into a painful bruise. This was critical when facing enemies like the Dacians, whose terrifying two-handed curved sword, the phalanx, could reportedly slice right through shields and helmets. Second, the design was brilliant for weight distribution. It weighed about the same as a mail shirt, but instead of hanging entirely from the shoulders, the armor rested on both the shoulders and the hips. This made it far less tiring to wear, a huge advantage for an army that marched constantly. And finally, its modular nature meant it could be mass-produced. Instead of one artisan spending weeks on a single mail shirt, different workshops could produce the plates, hinges, and straps, which could then be assembled as needed. It was an ancient version of an assembly line. Of course, it had its downsides. The iron plates rusted easily, especially in the damp climates of Britain and Germany. Soldiers had to spend hours scouring and oiling their armor. The internal leather straps could rot or snap, and the complex hinges on some models were prone to breaking. By the mid-3rd century AD, the Lorica segmentata seems to have fallen out of use, likely because the economic crises of the time made this complex armor too expensive to produce and maintain. But this armor was just one part of a complete, integrated fighting system. The Legionary was protected by an iron helmet, Bigolia, with a brow ridge to deflect sword cuts and a wide-neck guard. His main defense was the scutum, a large, curved, rectangular shield made of plywood. He would use the shield's heavy central boss to punch an enemy in the face, creating an opening for his main weapon, the gladius. The gladius was a short, stabbing sword, perfect for the brutal, close-quarters fighting of a shield wall. But before the swords came out, the Romans used a piece of brilliant tactical technology, the pilum. This was a heavy javelin with a long, thin iron shank. When a legionary hurled his pilum, its weight could punch through an enemy's shield. According to ancient writers, the soft iron shank was designed to bend on impact. This made it impossible for the enemy to pull it out and throw it back. Even better, it left the enemy with a 2-meter-long, 5-kilogram piece of metal dangling from his shield, forcing him to discard it right before the Roman charge. With the enemy's shield gone, the legionary was free to do his deadly work with the gladius. So the Roman soldier was a self-contained system of destruction. But what happened when the enemy refused to fight in the open and hid behind giant stone walls? That's when the Romans brought out the engines of empire. Early on, Roman siege warfare was basic. They'd either try a costly frontal assault or just surround a city and starve it out. That all changed when they encountered the advanced siegecraft of the Greeks. The Romans didn't just copy it. They perfected it, creating a standardized and terrifying arsenal. The heart of their siege train was torsion artillery, machines powered by massive twisted bundles of animal sinew rope. The king of the battlefield was the ballista. This was a two-armed machine like a giant, super-powered crossbow. It could hurl stone balls weighing 30 kilograms or more over 400 meters. A battery of ballistae firing relentlessly day and night could systematically demolish stone walls, shatter battlements, and terrorize the city's inhabitants. For more precise work, they had the Scorpio, the sniper rifle of the ancient world. This was a smaller, more accurate machine that fired heavy, iron-tipped bolts. A team of Scorpio crews, positioned in a siege tower, could dominate the enemy walls, picking off defenders one by one and allowing Roman assault troops to advance in safety. But artillery was just the beginning. The Romans were master engineers, and they used this skill to create truly colossal assault weapons. They built siege towers, mobile fortresses on wheels that could be over 100 feet tall. Covered in wet animal hides to make them fireproof, these towers were pushed right up to the enemy walls. The top floors were filled with archers and Scorpios to clear the battlements, while the main level housed a giant drawbridge that would drop down, allowing legionaries to pour directly onto the walls. For the most stubborn fortresses, located on high cliffs, the Romans would simply bring the ground up to them. The most famous example is the siege of Masada in 73 AD. The Jewish fortress sat on an impregnable rock plateau. So the Roman general Flavius Silva ordered his men to build a mountain. Over several months, thousands of soldiers and prisoners constructed a colossal siege ramp made of earth and timber, 100 meters high and 200 meters wide at its base. You can still see it today, a silent monument to Rome's sheer, bloody-minded determination. Once the ramp was complete, they simply wheeled a siege tower and a battering ram up to the top and broke through the wall. Perhaps the greatest feat of Roman engineering, though, was displayed at the siege of Alesia in 52 BC. Here Julius Caesar had trapped the Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix and 80,000 of his men. But Caesar learned that a massive Gallic relief army, perhaps 250,000 strong, was on its way. He was about to be besieged himself. Instead of retreating, Caesar ordered his men to build. They constructed an 11-mile line of fortifications facing inwards to keep Vercingetorix trapped. And then they built a 13-mile line of fortifications facing outwards to defend against the relief army. These weren't simple walls. They were a defense-in-depth system, a field of nightmares. There were trenches, ramparts, towers, and in front of them, 5 rows of sharpened branches buried like barbed wire, pits with fire-hardened stakes inside, and thousands of iron caltrops scattered on the ground. When the two-front battle came, Caesar's engineering held. The Gallic attacks were shattered, and the victory was won not by swords, but by shovels and saws. All this incredible hardware, the armor and the siege engines, would have been useless without the right software to run it. This was the mind of the Legion, its discipline, training, and tactical flexibility. The foundation for this was laid by the Marian reforms in 107 BC. Facing a manpower crisis, the general Gaius Marius opened the army to all citizens, regardless of wealth. The state now supplied standardized equipment, and soldiering became a full-time, long-term career. This created a professional army with a level of skill and endurance that no part-time militia could match. On the battlefield, this professionalism was expressed through flexible formations. The most famous was the testudo, or tortoise. Legionaries would lock their shields together, forming a mobile box that was almost completely impervious to arrows and stones, allowing them to advance safely under heavy fire. But the true key to all of this was disciplina militaris, iron discipline. This was forged in a brutal training regime. Recruits were forced on grueling 20-mile marches in full gear, and they practiced with wooden swords that were deliberately twice as heavy as the real thing. Discipline was enforced by the centurions, the tough-as-nails professional officers who formed the backbone of the army. Bravery was rewarded with medals and honors, but cowardice was punished with ruthless severity. For collective failure, the army could employ decimation, a horrifying ritual where a disgraced unit was divided into groups of 10, and each group was forced to draw lots and beat one of their own comrades to death. This brutal system ensured that every soldier's loyalty was to the unit and its standards. This combination of training and tactics allowed commanders to pull off incredible victories. At the Battle of Watling Street in 61 AD, the Roman governor Suetonius Paulinus faced Queen Boudica's massive rebel army. Paulinus had only 10,000 men against an enemy horde that may have numbered over 200,000. Knowing he'd be surrounded on an open plain, Paulinus chose his ground perfectly, a narrow gorge with a forest at his back. This forced the Britons to attack him on a narrow front, completely negating their numerical advantage. As the Britons charged uphill into the defile, the legions unleashed a devastating volley of pila, which tore the charge to pieces. Then, they advanced in disciplined wedge formations, punching into the disorganized mass and turning the battle into a slaughter. The Roman victory was absolute, a masterclass in using terrain and discipline to defeat overwhelming odds. So what was the secret to Rome's half-millennium of military dominance? It wasn't one thing. It was the system. It was the synergy between advanced personal armor that gave soldiers the confidence to close with the enemy, overwhelming engineering that could reduce any fortress to dust, and a ruthless doctrine of discipline and tactical flexibility that could outthink and outfight any opponent. The Lorica Segmentata is the icon, but the true weapon of Rome was its ability to identify a problem, engineer a solution, and integrate it into a holistic, disciplined system. This legacy endures. The very ideas of a professional army, the importance of logistics and engineering, and the concept of an NCO corps, the sergeants who form the backbone of our modern militaries, are all direct descendants of the Roman model. The Roman army may have fallen, but its ghost still haunts the science of war. So what are your thoughts on this? What part of the Roman war machine do you find most impressive? Let us know down in the comments below. If you found this interesting or learned something new, please give this video a like and don't forget to subscribe to 10-Minute History for more deep dives. Thanks for listening.